All right, welcome back to Adventures in Critical Thinking. We're in chapter 12. This is kind of a big one, probably at least two, maybe three videos. All right, we'll see how it goes. So, what do we start with? Understand egocentrism as a mind within the mind. Egocentric thinking functions subconsciously. Remember now, that's not unconsciously. There's the conscious, kind of like the id, superego, ego, superego. You've got the conscious mind, which I'm using right now, which most of us use, or it's in use, I should say, not being utilized properly or to its maximum potential. But anyway, conscious mind. Then beneath that is the subconscious mind, where things are available but not perceived until pulled forth. And then you get the unconscious. That's where I guess psychologists and psychiatrists and hypnotizers go to get the good stuff that's been lying about since you were a child, right? You've always seen those couch episodes where the patient's there on the laying on the couch, and the psychiatrist or psychologist, probably psychiatrist, is saying, "So let's go back. Let's go back to 5 years old when you were a child." And some of that may seem kind of silly, uh, staged, but according to research, if you understand psychology, most of our personality is formed by the time we're 8 years old, which is crazy. That's pretty young, right? Anyways, a lot of our impressions, right? We won't start thinking rationally or logically until we're probably 13 or so, and then it's not until your late 20s that you really begin to differentiate between action, cause, and effect. We really don't consciously, or it's not a natural, I should say, it's not a natural uh, follow up that, if we do something, we think, well, this is going to have a consequence. Just look around you, family, friends, look at videos on the internet, right? Anyways, egocentric thinking functions subconsciously like a mind within us that we deny we have. Oh, I like that. Yes, very much so. Okay. And this whole book, this chapter, this whole book, it's why we fail. Not the book, but what the book is explaining, right? No one says now I will think egocentrically for a while. Its ultimate goals are gratification and self validation, right? So by nature, we are very self centered, self focused. This should be pretty obvious when you're younger, and I've mentioned this before. When you're a child, when you're a baby, before you even develop language, you're just thinking you, right? Your parents could be getting hit. I don't know. Maybe that would make you a bit nervous if you're a baby. A lot of things going on outside of you. You don't understand. That those things going on outside of you also have emotional effects on people, you, but also others. So we don't think of others. It takes a while, and it takes some training. Even when you develop language, that's why we have parents. Good parenting. Parents, the main job of parents is to get the kids to come outside of themselves, right? I swear. You know, why do I have to eat this? Why do I have to do my homework? Why can't I stay up past midnight on a school night? Why can't I hang with those friends? Why can't I go there? Why can't I spend money on this, right? It does not respect the rights and needs of others. There you go. Although it may be protective of those with whom an ego identifies. There you go. So that's what I was talking about. So, be protective of uh, loved ones, parents, if you do love them, siblings, maybe. It's all qualifiable, depending on how you feel about those individuals and so forth. When we think egocentrically, we see ourselves as right and just. Oh, that's huge. And there is so much of that going on. If you look at the political realm, we talked about egocentrism, and then we talked about there's egoism, the individualism, and then there's groupism, groupthink, right? The herd mentality. So if we align ourselves with those who fall in line with our ego identity, or identifiers, then we will support that group. But if you are opposed to the group, especially if you're opposed to the group and the person uh, who is utilizing skills or lack of said skills is overtly egocentric and doesn't think beyond that, then they will ostracize you to the nth degree. Can I say that? We see those who disagree with us as wrong and unjustified, right? Uh, and people talk about, we're going to have to agree to disagree, and it's about accepting others and opposing arguments and contrary arguments, and that's what it's about. People can talk a good talk, but inside, you know what they're feeling? What all of us feel. No way, man. They don't think like me. I don't care what I'm saying or anybody else says. Our family, children, country, religion, beliefs, feelings, values, all are privileged in our egocentric mind. Um, Being validated is crucial to the egocentric mind. We seek it even when we have been unfair to others or flagrantly harmed by them, right? That's a good one. Flagrantly harmed by them. That's huge, right? When thinking egocentrically, we're interested only in facts that we can twist to support us. Oh boy. You can go no further than the political realm to see these points in action on a daily, if not hourly, minute by minute basis. We dislike or fear people who point out our inconsistency. That's good. This is all like going to therapy, isn't it? Reading this stuff. All very true though, right? And I'm not free of any of this. It's in me, it's in all of us, but we have to fight it. All begins with awareness and then effort and then compromise, I think, is probably the most important term there, right? If we criticize ourselves, it is not the occasion for significantly changing our behavior, but rather the means of avoiding such change. Uh, Crazy. For example, if I think I know I have a short fuse, but I can't help it, I lose my temper just like my father did. There you go. My criticism justifies my continuing to lose my temper by blaming someone else, right? Yeah. So many on the internet here. Others talk about them in the negative, and they just listen to whatever that criticism is and make a change. Did no one ever, or very few people will do that, right? One way we use egocentric thinking then is to validate our current belief system. There you go, right? If I'm an American, if I'm a Republican or Democrat, choose your party. If I am I guess you go by generation, right? If I'm geez, I'm blanking on generations. If I'm a boomer, if I'm a Gen Zer, if I'm a whatever, right? The groupthink mentality, right? We want to validate our current belief systems, right? That's the key phrase there, right? We want to validate our current belief system. When we feel internally validated, we live comfortably with ourselves, even if what we're doing is unethical. There you go, right? So I think the left or the right is wrong. I go out and I persecute them. I yell at them. I may even riot and cause damage and harm to the area, to public offices, to individuals. I may hurt, harm, even kill. But if the opposition dies, well, it's not my fault that they think that way or that they thought that way, right? What is it? Play stupid games, get stupid prizes. And, you know, nobody's free of that type of thinking. Nobody from one particular party is superior to another or one individual superior to another. We're all fallible. We all err in many areas of life, right? For example, if I have been brought up to believe that people of a certain race are inferior, my egocentric thinking enables me to maintain all the following beliefs. I am not prejudiced. They simply are inferior. I judge each person I meet on his or her own merits. I just don't think this person has merits, and I am an open-minded person. There you go. I know I'm a good person. I'm a moral person. I'm an ethical person. I understand things. I understand people, and I also understand that those people are inferior. And I'm being fair. They just are. There's no question. We're delusional, right? With these beliefs operating in my thinking, I do not see myself as jumping to conclusions about members of this race. I do not think of myself as wronging them in any way. Isn't that crazy? I see myself as simply recognizing them for what they are, even though what you're recognizing them as is purely made up from your point of view, right? Others might think like you. Some will think in total opposite to you. Some may believe you partially. Some may just say the whole thing is silly, right, and write it off, right? So just because you have a particular point of view doesn't mean that you're right. Or just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you're right. It's just that you're offended, right? My wife offends me with things that she says about me, and I go, well, that's highly offensive, and I'm very upset by that. And then when I think about what she said, I go, well, I may be upset, but she's right. Not always, but if you're honest with yourself, you'll see the error of your ways. Although I ignore the evidence that demonstrates the falsity of what I believe, I do not see myself ignoring the evidence. Oh man, this is gold right here, right? I do not think of myself as racist because being a racist is bad, and I'm not that. I'm not a racist. And then, of course, the people calling you racist are probably racist, but a different type of racist, right? And what is racism? Boy, it was actually so bad back in the 1900s when Lincoln was came forth with the Emancipation Proclamation, 13th, 14th Amendments. Um, Lincoln actually met. It was bad. It was pretty bad. And I think there's a lot of truth to what he had to say. Lincoln met with black leaders, and he said, we're going to do this. We're going to have, work towards equal rights. We're going to free you physically, and hopefully we're going to free you politically and socially otherwise, right, beyond the physical. But he said, I don't think it's ever, to be honest, I don't think it's ever going to be better. And he gave them an option of helping them move to another country. I'm serious, right? So is that type of, racism, is racism that deep or that systemic or that expansive? We've definitely come very far, quite a far way in the last 100 years or so, but still issues at hand. Because people are people. Is it ever going to be 100% cured or better? No. Only when we explicitly develop our ability to analyze ourselves rationally can we begin to see these tendencies in ourselves. There you go. And you got to be strong. You got to be courageous. You got to be honest. You got to be one of the few, the proud, not the Marines, but the critical thinkers, right? When we do, it is almost never at the precise moments when our egocentric mind is in control. Oh, yes. Yes. Once egocentric thinking begins to take control, it spontaneously rationalizes. I like that word. Phrase, spontaneously Rationalize. Remember, as critical thinkers, we're always looking for keywords and phrases, those that we can really key in on, right? Thus, key, the word key. Again, let's repeat, once egocentric thinking begins to take control, it spontaneously rationalizes and deceives itself into seeing its position as the only justifiable position, right? It sees itself as experiencing the truth, no matter how inaccurate is the picture of things it is painting. Oh, this is all gold. Usually, I tell my students, and I'm doing this now, and I rarely do this. With most, I've read hundreds of books, probably 1,000 books or more, probably even more than that, because I've read a lot of college texts as well, right? I'm talking 1,000 or more books on my personal time, but professional, I probably read 2,000. I don't know. But I rarely, if you look at my books, in the old days, we used to have things called books with pages, and it's physical. They're actually physical and tangible. I don't have one here. A lot of it's online now. But I used to annotate like this, but better, because with a pencil you can, write in there. Wow, this is great. What does this mean? Look this word up. Yes, I can summarize something. I can write as well as just highlight or underline, right? With a few colors, right? But I tell my students, don't just fill up the whole page with a highlighter, and that's what I'm doing. But rarely do you read something that is so chock full of goodness, my goodness. There's just so much that's good in here, right? This skilled self-deception effectively blocks reasonable thoughts from correcting distorted thoughts. Again, man, I'm in love with this stuff. This is great. And the more highly, I think one of the reasons I love teaching and I love enlightening people, but also I realize that the deep, dark core of our existence, this is stuff that really needs to be looked at to make ourselves much, much, much healthier mentally, emotionally, socially, politically, psychologically. Oh, it's just, this is, I don't know if it's the end all and cure all, but it's a pretty big cure, right? And the more highly self-deceived we are, the less likely we are to recognize our irrationality. There you go. Longer it goes, deeper it goes, just like The Matrix. You know that movie, The Matrix? Allegedly, if you were in the Matrix beyond the age of 30, you were stuck in there, right? Because you've self-deceived yourself so much. You've been self-deceived. I repeated it. You've been self-deceived so much into believing that the virtual reality that you're seeing is real that you can't ever get away from that. And this is a problem for older people, right? The longer you wait to study this stuff, when did I start studying this stuff? In my late 20s, early 30s. It's a little late, but still, I'm a little different. I'm a very open-minded person, generally speaking. He says, as he makes it obvious to himself with a little bit of study and insight, that he's totally not that. Not kidding, but it takes a while. It takes work. But you got to work at it. That's the bottom line. And the more highly self-deceived we are, the less likely we are to recognize our rationality, the less likely we are to consider relevant information our egocentricity is blocking from our view, and the less motivated, right? Less motivated we are to develop truly rational beliefs and views. Again, pure gold. If information, understanding, or that which will bring us out of the dark age, the dark mind, the dark existence, and pull ourselves up into the light, go to the light. Every poltergeist, the little lady. I don't know if she's a poltergeist expert, but she's like the little girl got stuck, and she was deep in the darkness, and the little I don't know, ghost poltergeist expert lady. She's short in stature, probably a midget. Can I use that word? And she's going, go to the light. That should be our that should be the name of my company. Go to the light. My company is called Inner Projection, right? So you want to get in there the good, take the bad out, put in the good, and then project the good. Successful egocentric thinking, although egocentric thinking is irrational by nature, it can be functional within a dysfunctional logic. True. That's true, right? Um, just like critical thinking, you can be a good critical thinker, but you can do it unfairly, unjustly, unethically, right? Just ignore that stuff or that aspect of critical thinking. For example, it often enables us to selfishly get what we want without having to worry about the rights of the people we deny in doing so. Type of thinking, though defective from the viewpoint of evidence, sound reasoning, objectivity, and fair play, is often successful from the point of view of self-gratification. Hence, although egocentric thinking is inherently flawed, it can be successful in achieving its irrational goals, right? So that's a big point to remember and retain. We see this in many persons of power and status in the world. There you go, including successful politicians, as I was talking about, lawyers, business people. They often are skilled in getting what they want and able to rationalize unethical behavior with great sophistication. That's what I was talking about, right? And people who are not really aware of this easily get duped into believing what's going on. For example, most politicians will easily manipulate and manage the weak mind, and there's probably more weak minds out there than are strong minds. And what happens statistically is that the majority of time we are voting people into power, and we are voting against our very wants and needs. Right? Happens. The rationalization could be as simple as, this is a hard, cruel world. We have to be realistic. We have to realize we don't live in a perfect world. I wish we did. And after all, we are doing these things the way things have always been done. Right? Conversely, rationalization can be complex, such as thoughts masked in highly developed philosophical, ideological, or party platforms. Although egocentric thinkers may use ethical terms in their rationalizations, this is a cover for their real intentions, although they do not respect ethical principles, but may invoke them to get what they want, right? So a lot, that's why politicians are often seen as dirty dogs, rats, snakes, snake in the grass, two-faced, right? Somebody yelled at Lincoln one time at I don't know if it was a lecture, probably some type of debate scenario situation, and somebody yelled at Lincoln, "You're two-faced," and Lincoln shouted back, "If I'm two-faced, why would I use this one?" There you go. Egocentric thinking then is indifferent to ethical principles or genuine conscience. We cannot be focused exclusively at one and the same, on getting what we selfishly want and genuinely taking into account the rights and needs of others. The only time egocentric thinking takes others into account is when it is forced to do so to get what it wants. Oh man, this is therapy, isn't it? It's psychology. Hence, an egocentric politician may take into account the views of the public interest group only when her reelection depends on the support of that group. So that's the two-faced right there, and that's very common. And I've been around. Oh, I've seen elections, many elections come and go, a dozen or more elections, and most of the time, most of the politicians will talk a good talk, but they don't walk the walk. They just want to get in. Once they get in, then they do what they want. Right? She is not focused on the justice of the group's cause, but rather on the realization that if she fails to publicly validate those views, that group will refuse to support her reelection. And I think it's funny that people say, "Oh, so and so is such a flopper." They flop from one opinion or point of view to the next. They all do. One is not pure above all the rest. If you're in that, I think it was Jimmy Carter who said, "I was not a very successful politician or even president, maybe, because of the fact that," and he was a Christian, a pretty serious Christian, ethical and moral as you can be in politics, right? And he said, I believe I didn't fare that well because of the fact that politics is a very evil, malicious, cutthroat business. Right? She cares only about what it is in her selfish interest, as long as the concern is selfish. By definition, the rights and needs of others are not perceived as relevant. There you go. This is just amazing. Corporate executives. I watched 3 movies on the building of 3 companies, organizations. One was BlackBerry, one was Nike, and the Michael Jordan effect. Nike blew up after Michael Jordan was signed on. He was the one that turned Nike into a monster, right? And then Stephen Jobs, right? Apple. And all 3 of those stories are just rife with some very nasty, cutthroat, evil, malicious type of action, thinking and action, right? Because it's about survival of the fittest. It's about survival of the company. If I have to disappoint the clients, if I have to disappoint the consumer, if I have to disappoint the board of directors, if I have to disappoint my best friends who I've hired, right? I saw Stephen Jobs. He was ousted because the board of directors didn't like what he was doing for the company at one point. And then the company suffered, and they said, "Oh, we got to get our figurehead, our namesake, get Stephen Jobs back, and that'll bring in a lot of bring customers back, bring us back up to snuff." And the CEO that hired him was once Stephen Jobs accepted the position and got back in as, I don't know what his position was when he was rehired, but the executive that hired him was quickly ousted, kicked out by Stephen Jobs himself. The guy that brought him back into the fold, right, helped him get back into the fold. Stephen Jobs kicked him out. So yeah, a lot of what they're talking about here is very prevalent in business, politics, and other fields, right? So be aware, be leery. I dealt with a lot of business politics. That's why I got out. And I've been working for myself pretty much on a contract basis for the last 30 years. Corporate executives who ensure that the expected earnings of the company are significantly overstated to enable them to sell stock at a high price. A whole lot of that stuff going on. Cause innocent people to lose money. Investing, Enron is one, right? But it's not on the first thing. Most CEOs who manipulate data in this way do not worry about the well-being of potential investors. Of course not. Their justification must be, let the buyer beware. Also, let me continue to make profits, keep my job, and keep my buddies in the red, right? In the black, not in the red. By using this type of justification, they avoid facing unethical nature of their behavior. Right. And that's another thing. In those 3 movies or 3 stories that I read about, watched, learned about, a lot of unethical, ethical behavior. CEOs and higher ups and even underlings getting caught, arrested. Right? Highly skilled egocentric thought is frequently generated in every type of human situation. For those involving the rights and needs of thousands of people, it's a simple everyday interaction. It's true. Imagine that a couple, Max and Maxine, routinely watch movies together. Inevitably, Max wants to watch an action-filled movie. Maxine wants to watch a love story like my sisters and I. I wanted to watch Batman. They wanted to watch Lost in Space. Now you know how old I am. I think one was on for an hour. So I think they were able to watch like the first half hour, and then I would watch the last half hour. That happened to be when Batman was on, which wasn't fair to them because they didn't get to see. They only got to see half their show. It's back before reruns in YouTube, so if you missed it, you missed it. Have to talk to your friends to get the details. Although Maxine is often willing to set aside her choices to go along with Max's desires, Max is never willing to go along with Maxine's choices. Max rationalizes his position to Maxine, telling her his movie choices are better because they are filled with thrilling action, because love stories are always slow moving, boring, because his movies are always award winners, because no one likes to watch movies that make you cry, because, and so forth, right? I watched a great movie a dramedy. And that wasn't really a comedy. It was more of a drama, a love story. I think the missing husband, the something about that, if it was. It was very well done. I was blown away. I'm not a huge romantic movie guy, Notebook, whatever the thing. Some of them are a little maudlin, over the top, a little too much. They're always trying to pull on the heartstrings. It's Hollywood's obvious, over the top, dramatic way of pulling on the heartstrings just to, bring people into the box office, bring in the gullible. But this one was really well done. The trauma that they experienced, the marriage breakup, the tragedies of losing a husband or a wife, uh, also there, but it wasn't overdone. It was done very naturally. Anyways, yet all of them camouflage the real reasons that Max simply wants to watch the type of movie that he likes. Right? My daughter loves what is it? Those horror movies. The vampire movies, the sexy vampires in a sexy world, and yeah, I just don't find that interesting. Anyways, all right, unsuccessful egocentric thinking. When egocentric thought is unsuccessful, it creates problems. Yes, for those influenced by the thinker and for the thinker himself or herself. And that's the problem. Right? And these problems are being created all the time. Looking back at Max and Maxine, imagine that for many months they go through this movie choosing routine in which, through self-serving argumentation, Max is able to manipulate Maxine into going along with his movie choices. But one day, Maxine decides she simply isn't going along with Max's selfish behavior and choosing which movie to watch. She begins to feel resentment towards Max. Doesn't probably just end up leaving Max, right, for silly reasons, and that's cause enough. Silliness or silly reasons oftentimes cause enough to leave or break up. She begins to infer that perhaps Max isn't truly concerned about her. The more she thinks about it, the more she begins to see that Max is selfish in the relationship in a number of ways. He is unwilling to go along with her movie choices, further tries to control her. Go to lunch every day, wouldn't eat lunch, well. Maxine begins to feel manipulated, used. She rebels. She no longer simply goes along. She begins to tell him she doesn't agree with his choices. Well, geez, come on. Drop the hammer. Let's go. Goodbye, Max. At this point, the table is turned for Max. His egocentric thinking is no longer working. He feels anger, right? Anger, resentment. Feels like he's not doing anything wrong. Because he lacks insight into this dysfunctional thinking, he doesn't realize he's actually manipulating Maxine or doing anything wrong. Because Maxine's resentment is now leading to acts of retaliation, Max's life is less successful and so forth. So you get the gist of what's going on, right? Let's go to let's go down here. Consider a gang that randomly chooses to harass a person wearing a sweatshirt of the same color. It's right, the same color as its group color. I don't know why you would harass the same color, but the members begin with verbal assaults and so forth, and you can read through that, right? So this is what gangs do. You live north of Main Street. You're evil. You're of the Red Handkerchief gang. We're the Blue Handkerchiefs south of Main Street. Let the killing begin, right? Such and why there's something really failing inside the ego, the pride, the selfishness, the ignorance, the stupidity, the uselessness, the vapidness. I can't think of many more negative words. Is just, you know, you're not only fighting but killing each other for the smallest and most insignificant, ridiculous reason, right? Same with the religion. My arbitrary made up religion is based in blah blah blah, but your arbitrary made up religion is based in blah blah blah. Right? And when it does not cause direct harm to others, egocentric thinking may lead to chronic self pity or depression. For some people, when the problems emerge, they easily revert to this type of thinking, right? And you can read through that. Here, I'll pause, take a snapshot of it. Egocentric, self-pitying persons fail to recognize the positives in life. True. I have a neighbor. She is always yelling. She is always mad. She is always angry. She is always at the center of crisis. And I don't see her living a life much different from those of her neighbors, right? Living in a nice neighborhood, got relative privileges. She's got children. Well, she has had a couple children taken away. Probably because of that irrational, egocentric behavior, right? Why is there something so heinously wrong in your life that on a daily, if not daily, a weekly basis, you're always yelling and screaming and fighting and cursing and kicking? I mean, if it's that bad, if it keeps on going week after week, month after month, year after year, so change something. Something's got to change. Either change it or check out. Stop bugging people. So they may cause unnecessary suffering to themselves, but then more likely they project it out onto the other, right? And that's what the most angry, consistently and addictively angry people are doing, right? Rational, reasonable thinking, although irrationality plays a significant role. Let me pause for a second. Take a look and see where we are. Yeah, we'll go a little further. Although rationality plays a significant role in human life, human beings are in principle capable of thinking and behaving rationally, but it's not natural, right? You have to learn, right? And that's what they're going to talk about here, right? And this point has been brought up before. You have to learn. And here's a nice little chart. Rational sometimes results in mistake, but it's reasonable overall. Egocentric, sociocentric, strives to protect itself, to validate itself, strives to maintain its point of view, sees the world from its narrow, self-certain point of view, often is rigid, flexible. Successful when it gets what it selfishly wants, unsuccessful when it fails to get what it selfishly wants. Or probably unsuccessful as it persecutes others unjustly, right? Hence, although egocentrism causes us to suffer from illusion of perspective, we can transcend these illusions by practicing thinking, right? And that's what we're here for. We want to practice and we shall overcome it. Just as we can take our point of view to the main thrust of what has been going on we've been primed with that, right? So now they're just continuing. We've got the brunt of what they're talking about. So now they'll just continue to expand upon this. So I'm going to do a little more of a cursory look at what we've got here, okay? Just as we can take our own point of view to absolute, we can also learn to recognize the key word again, learn. Recognize that our point of view is always incomplete, sometimes blatantly self-serving. True. It goes on. Each of us has the potential for developing our rational minds and using that development to resist or correct egocentric thought patterns. Right? That's what we talked about before. The logic of rationality. And again, some of these terms should look familiar, right? Purpose, key question, information, point of view, implication, consequences, essential concepts, and so forth, right? Again, I'm not going to go over these in minute detail. Here's a snapshot. If you don't have the book, take a picture. Pause it, take a picture. Or just pause it and study it. Let us imagine the case of Todd and Teresa. So here's another example, right? I'm not going to go through this. Examples, this is developing an idea that's been established, right? Thus, just as unconscious self-deceptive thinking is the vehicle for accomplishing rational ends, conscious self-deceptive thinking is the vehicle for achieving, irrational, also for achieving rational ends. Right? So it can be rational, irrational. Depends on your objective and how much you're willing to fool others, fool yourself, maybe, or maybe not fooling yourself. You don't care. You're just going to lie. You're not lying to yourself if you know what's going on, but you're caught up in deception, right? How long can that stand? How long can that last, right? Here's a nice figure. This figure compares the tendencies of inherent egocentric thinking with those of cultivated non-egocentric thinking. Again, nice little chart to study, right? Take a look at that. Work that through. Rational thinking, by contrast, is justified by the giving of good reasons. It is not deceptive, all right? So again, we're, I don't want to say belaboring the point, but establishing an understanding with restating, also showing examples. Right? To develop your rational capacities, then you have to understand that at any given moment, your thoughts, feelings, desires can be controlled by either egocentric or rational thinking. Right? And we know that. Or at least you should know that by now. For you to reach more of your rational potential, you must become a student. Learning is one thing, but becoming a student is serious, disciplined, repetitive, consistent learning. A student of the interplay between rational and irrational thought, motivation in your life, and so forth, right? And I think we'll end it there, okay? Two egocentric functions. Yeah, so I think we'll get a third video out of this, right? At the end, egocentric domination. At the end of these chapters, there is often a lot of this, right? Exercises, charts, extensive examples, right? Here's your charts, more charts, big charts, lots of charts, ongoing charts. And here's your example, right? So we'll take an egocentric submission, more charts. There are countless examples of this mode of functioning in everyday life. Right? So yeah. Consider the for example, right? So a lot of this, here's more examples. A lot of this towards the end is, extensive examples, because what chapters do generally is they front load. They explain the points that are attempting to be expressed in that chapter to the greatest degree. Majority of what you need to know or understand about any chapter is up front, right? And then the rest of it, yeah, look, now this is all correcting. So you've learned what the problem is, right? So now here's some possible, an array or multiple examples of correction, right? So as I said before, there's your projection. As I said, with stereotyping, scapegoating, right? As I said before, some of these chapters, this one specifically, 40 plus pages, they have a tendency to go on and on. Just, I say, some people might say, well, that's too much. Look at it, still going, like the Energizer Bunny. There's a whole bunch of charts at the end, right? Still going. So it's very extensive, very exhaustive. There's a conclusion, right? But I'm not going to go over everything there in minute detail. I will just hit the key points in the last 30 pages. I mean, heaven help us if we have to go to a fourth video. I don't think you want that or I want that. Anyways, that's it for now. We'll see you next time. Take care.